You're listening to The Practice of a Hoodoo Baptist, my personal journey of root work, faith, and ancestral wisdom. I'm the creator and host, Chelsea Bonchaz. This is where I honor the ones who came before me and share what's been passed down and walk you through my experiences of being unapologetically aligned, covered by spirit, guided by blood. I have a very special guest today, Mawiyah Kai EL-Jamah Bomani. She is an amazing individual, but I'm going to let y'all figure that out through this conversation because I already know it's going to be amazing. She is a New Orleans-born writer, spirit woman, and priestess of OYA in the Yoruba tradition. She's also an award-winning playwright and author. Her work is everywhere. If you don't know, please educate yourself because her work is everywhere. But let me tell you, she's the author of the Conjuring the Calabash, empowering women with hoodoo spells and magic. And guess what, y'all? She has a new book coming out, Hoodoo Saints and Root Warriors, Stories of Magic for Liberation. Listen, she's a respected educator, diviner, and host of her own podcast, which I want to know more about. But listen, she carries the legacy of an 8th generation witch, weaving storytelling, ritual, and ancestral wisdom into her work. And this is the perfect platform for us to get into it. Mawiyah, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. That was a beautiful introduction. I'm all
Thank
women.
you.
I'm all women.
Awesome. Listen. So I kind of been stalking you on Instagram, honey. I will be honest. Between Instagram and Threads, I'm like, oh, when's the new book coming out? When's the book coming out? Because you make sure, first of all, I love that during when Sinners came out, I don't know if you noticed, I'm sure you did, but when Sinners came out online, it was such this just resurgence and just intertwine of everybody from all ends
Right,
coming
right,
into the space trying to figure out what is hoodoo, why is it, and
right,
people
right,
discovering, oh, so it's not demonic. Oh, so
right,
this is
right. 'Cause,
actually
you,
like
you're
for
thinking it could
us.
go either way, right? You're thinking
Yeah,
it could really go like people are like, oh my God, don't go see that. And then
yeah.
you had pockets of that, people buying a ticket to go there and start preaching.
Mm-hmm.
But then it went, yeah, people were really trying to figure out how they fit into this indigenous practice, right?
Yeah. And I love that. So I saw being familiar with your work already, but I did see that online your presence, you were more present online during that time because you took a little moment to like educate some people and
Right.
also, letting folks know, like what you just said, like, hey, like there are people who are part of this tradition, family, within this space. We're
Mhm,
here if you have questions. Like y'all
mhm.
just say anything.
Right,
Y'all are just
right.
saying anything online. Like we're here. You have questions. What did you, you saw the film.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? I would
On the
love,
film itself.
yeah, of the film and, or just like, because for me personally, I love the film. I thought the film was it was so refreshing to
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
personally because I'm only 36. Well, I'll be 37 by the time this episode comes out. I'm a Hoodoo Heritage Month baby. October 2nd. Okay, I
Right.
start the month off. Okay. But yeah, like growing up, I did not have that many films to
Yeah.
look at that brought some type of representation of my great grandmother or
Mhm.
grandmother or mother or just a lot of people in my family. There wasn't a lot of representation of the tradition. And there were certain films that did kind of fit the pocket, like Daughters of the Dust,
Yes.
Eve's Bayou,
Uh-huh.
like where
Uh,
it's a little
Yeah,
bit in there
yeah.
where it's positive. So I love talking to other people who grew up in the tradition, been in the tradition, and seeing like their perspective. So anything you would like to share about your thoughts of the film?
Yeah. I enjoyed it. Well, I'll go back to before it came out.
Mm-hmm.
So probably around I want to say March, I got a phone call from Yvonne Chirot, and
Mm-hmm.
she was
Yes.
asking me if I was interested in helping out with the marketing for the movie. So I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I was at work, right? I was at school and I'm like, hello, who is this? I'm like, okay, let me step out of the class for a minute. Y'all are on your own for a little bit.
Okay.
We talked about it and I said, yeah. So she was like, well, Hollywood is kind of fickle. They may call, they may not. And so then I did get a call, right, from Warner Brothers. And they sent me a copy of the movie to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea, what they wanted at first, and this was a predominantly white setting, right? That they
Right.
wanted, somebody to come down and to make juju bags for the press,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
And so I went into this long spiel about, the authenticity of the practice, taking it seriously and not painting it like, it's not, it does sit in the realm of a vampire movie, but we're not going to
Yes.
bring stakes out and fake coffins, not that kind of an idea. And so if you want to have the movie respected by practitioners, then that is not the route to go. And so it was a back and forth thing, and the sister did really understand it. Then I got to talk
Mhm.
to a man who was a white guy, and he was kind of like, "Well, okay, whatever," kind of thing. But they didn't go that route with the bags and things like that. And so
Mhm.
for me, I think that watching the movie after, having that conversation, I started to really feel as though, it really allow people to be pulled in like a Daughters of the Dust. So for us,
Yes.
it's more than a vampire movie, right?
Mhm.
And that was
Mhm.
because we can think about vampires as somebody trying to take your energy, right?
Right,
We can think about
absolutely.
it that way, not just, the bloodsuckers of the movies, right?
Absolutely.
And so when I looked at it, that's what I got from it. I got from it taking your culture, taking your
Mhm.
ashe,
Yeah.
sucking your energy out. And how do you combat that? We rely on that old magic, right? And what that
Mhm.
is that blending of everything, whether it's Native American, whether it's the herbs
Yes.
and things that we learned, and, in a Eurocentric manner, and then our Africanness of it all. And so that's what I really took from it. And I think that I would like to think, right? I tell my husband all the time, that, saying not going in that direction, that really pushed it in that way in which we could really embrace it, and not make it as though it's something silly. You know what I'm saying? And to be
Mhm.
tossed aside. That's why you had so many people constantly going over and over again because they could feel the magic in it. I was talking to one of my friends. And she was saying she's a therapist, and she was saying people were coming in talking to her about the movie, before they would talk about their sessions. And she said she felt, that it was
Excitement
yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah.
it had all of this energy in it that was totally, from our ancestors. It wasn't a horror movie. It was something else for us. And our history is horror in its own right.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because Hollywood, yeah, oftentimes just erases or diminishes the tradition.
Yeah,
And it's always at the butt of the joke as well,
yeah.
I think in some aspects. So they're just that's why I was like, it was just refreshing to see something done right, or even more so, just true representation that a lot of us could relate to, who had
Yeah,
mamas, grandmamas, great grandmothers,
yeah. Oh yeah.
who practice. I want to get a little bit into like your writing, because in a world where like what does it mean for you to write hoodoo in the literary canon? Because in this
Yeah.
world that often tries to erase or diminish it, what does that mean to you to actually write about it and to be true to the tradition?
But it's been hard. I know, I started writing that first book during the time of the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
We're on lockdown. And, I was researching, I was looking, and a lot of the books in the metaphysical realm or the occult realm or whatever realm you want to put them in, there are two major players. There's Llewellyn and there's Weiser, right? And,
Yeah.
there are very few of the writers who really are speaking to us, right? And even if they look like us, right, they're not speaking to
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
when I was writing it and trying to shop it around the idea, there was one editor who was like, "We like it, but we want you to, why don't you spend more time talking about Black women and sex magic?" You know what I'm saying? And I felt like that was kind of like diminishing us, right?
Mhm.
Making it where we're just, these vixens, and wanting to talk about magic in that way, like we're on an auction block, right? And
Right.
sexualized. And so I was like, sex magic is a part of that book, but it is not the whole canon of that book,
Right.
you know? And so if we want to look at Black women and empowering Black women, we have to talk about everything that makes up our lives, right? And it's not just what we do in the bedroom, you know? And of
That
course, we can
part.
use that magic for our benefit, but that is not who we are. That's who you make us out to be.
Mhm.
And so, of course, that, we went back and forth, and she was like, "Well, I'll take what you have to the higher ups," which I knew she wouldn't, you know. And so probably about an hour later, she called back and was like, "Well, we think that we want to shelve that idea," which was fine. So I did go to Llewellyn. Now, I'll have to tell you, my husband, he laughs about this all the time. I was like, I really wanted to be on Wiser because they had the Ankh on their book, you know. So I said, well, I'll try Llewellyn. And so they were like, okay, yeah, we love it. We love it. And
Mm,
so about a week later, that same lady called me back from Weiser, and she's like, and I said, well, I'm going with Llewellyn now. So she was, her whole idea was like, well, they take forever to put books out, but they wanted everything that I said. I said,
mm,
look, I need to have a female editor, and she needs to be a black woman. I don't want my book cover to have, cauldrons and just herbs on it. I
mhm.
want to have an image from a black woman. And they were like, okay. And I was like, okay, well, let me keep asking. And so I said, I'm going to be talking to Black women, and so I'm not going to write a book that, it's intended to speak to white women. That's not what it's for. Because
Yeah,
white people have their own magic, and that's
yeah.
okay. We need our own section of books, that speaks to us. And so I said, I wanted to talk to BIPOC people. I wanted to talk to that. I wanted to speak to that element. And they were in agreements with that. And I think a lot of it was because of the times we were in, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. I think that they
Right.
were really like, okay, we want to show that we're not racist, so we're going to let you have whatever you say you need. And it worked out well. I think a part of it was that they didn't feel that it would do well. I think that they thought that they would put it out, and I think that a certain element of people felt as though it would prove that we're not in this idea of being, supremacist mindset.
Mhm.
But also, if it doesn't do well, we could say we tried. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? And I
yeah.
think that it did so well for them that they saw that, "Oh, this works." And so some of the things that I took out, they came back and they were like, "Do you wanna do another one?" And I had already had an idea to do the Root Warriors one.
Look at
So
that.
I believe that because my whole thing, I kept saying the same thing over and over again. Black women will buy books. We buy books,
We
like
do.
nobody else. We have a to be read stack, everywhere in the bathroom. We put it in
Absolutely.
the bathtub if it wouldn't mess them up,
Listen,
every Mhm.
everywhere, entire apartment is a
Yes.
library.
Yes. Yes. So, and I think they just had to see. They
Yeah.
had to really see. And so for me, it was just fighting against that, the idea that those words speaking directly to Black people, would it really reach their ears enough for them to spend the money on the book? Would they wanna do
Mhm.
it?
Yeah.
And so I always had the idea I wanted to write a book for me when I was 17, 16, 15, growing up in it, but still wanting to see those authors who look like me, saying the
Mhm.
things that I already know, but
Mhm.
also some other ways of doing it. And so it was just fighting against that in publishing. And it's in every genre, but definitely in publishing. And I think a lot of people feel as though if somebody agrees to publish you, then they're wholeheartedly 100% behind what you're doing. And
Absolutely.
sometimes, in whatever you're in, I'm with you to see, just to see. Because I want that green, right? But I just want to see. And it proves a point. Hey, when you start pointing fingers at who's racist, not me, kind of
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that first book, it definitely centered women's empowerment through hoodoo.
Yeah.
And right on time too, I think, as
Hmm.
well. Not just because that's something that we needed. We needed that in the space, but also I think just the alignment with it being at that time, it was almost like with George Floyd. I think a lot of us experienced it were white spaces, corporations, brands, they were just like, "Okay, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
this just
Oh
do it."
yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just a time of like, "Okay, well this let me make my pick. Let me throw out the cards."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it just worked in your favor, and I think for a lot of Black folks, like, at that time to just really push it out, and it was also for us personally, like, we were listening, we were ready, and we were just eating it up. I do wanna get into the new book, Hoodoo Saints and Root Warriors, because
Hmm.
it's so powerful as I've been getting into it, and I'm a buy a book, read a book, got a PDF, and Imma listen to it.
Right, right.
Imma do all the things. Can
Mhm.
you g can you give us a glimpse into the book? Like, maybe talk about one of the stories, or even more so one of the teachings from the book, something that wasn't in the first book where you're like, "Okay, for round 2, this is definitely
Yeah,
going into, 'cause I
yeah,
I have to say this."
yeah.
Anything that you're
I
excited
think
to share?
I think overall, I really wanted to talk about Eshu of Humbajira. I really wanted to talk about that energy. With this book, it was I didn't want, because one of the things that they came back with, they said that, I had to say, I had to put a disclaimer, kind of like, let people know that, if it invokes any type of trauma, because of the things that we talk about in the book, they really wanted to let people know ahead of time that it was edgy, and I felt like, wow,
Mm.
I had never, I was Googling myself, how many books have to put.
That is new because even when I listen to it on the Audible, it says that in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
And so I didn't want and I was really worried about that, right? I stuck with that for a long time, and I went back thinking, "Well, do I need to go back and look at what's there?" And I said, "You know what? Fuck it." You know what I'm saying? We're just gonna do it like this. And so I wrote it up in no time. They were like, "Do you want us to write?" I was like, "No, I'll do it." And so working with each of the saints for me, I had to put the historical impact in there. I had to talk about what's happening now. Because for a lot of people, it's like Emmett Till, and then we don't know, we just go back in history. Okay, we heard about that. All right, but that's not happening today. But then we have all of these stories, this generation has, we have the Trayvon Martins, we have all of this. So I needed to have the book centered on how we can use saints in our own lives, how we can create our own saints. And so talking about issues energy, right? Opening this portal, how we manage this energy, how we deal with, systemic racism, because the book had to be centered in that, because that's what we're fighting against for, today, fighting against that and trying to liberate ourselves in that way. So for me, Eshu was a biggie. I really wanted to touch upon that, not just because of the Yoruba, standpoint, but I think because for us, we're always at this intersection. Where do we go? How do we do things? And
yeah,
even if you feel like, well, that doesn't affect me, because I knew a lot of people who were saying that, what's happening with ICE, it doesn't affect me, so I'm not even worried about that. That's brown people's things, and I always tell people something's gonna come for you. There's your day, right? So
right.
you need to be fighting with everybody who's fighting. If they're out there kicking ass, you need to be out there kicking ass just as much as them, and so, that being this place of where do we go? How do we step into this? I needed to talk about that. And the other things for me, it just fell in line because I always do divination. So I divine who wants to be with this project, right? And those were the people that stepped up, and those were the energies that I went with. And so, yeah, there was never anything was never kind of like, oh, I'm just going to do this person. It was always a asking, is it okay to have your work, your life, your world, put into this book? So for me, that was a really biggie, that whole intersection of coming to whatever form of liberation or activism you're in or you're working towards. And she was
Mhm.
for me for that. And then talking about the Maroons, right? Talking about that type of energy, giving us that credence to fight, and just that back energy that lets us know that we were always fighters. Listen to what they tell you. You know what I'm saying? We were always fighting.
Yep.
And so many of our stories in that area of fight, of course they don't want us to know, that we don't hear about. And so I just wanted the book to be something that anybody could pick up. You didn't have to
Mhm.
be initiated to anything. You could still be going to church every Sunday, wherever, going to mass, whatever you're doing, and you could pick this up and say, I am part of this community of people who need to be liberated. And so today we're going to do this work, me and my friends, and you don't have to live in the same area. You could be wherever you want to be, different states, different countries, and you can make that pact that at this time we're going to do this work. I wanted it to be like that. So you didn't have to start at page one. You could go to the back, and then I wanted
Mhm.
to do a reading list for people who want more and to
Yeah.
have more, be able to have more talking points when somebody tries to challenge them about what they're
Mhm.
doing. And so that was important to me as well. And they were like, really? You want all these books? Yes. I need all those books and more. you know? So
And
I
that's what the people really want too, I think. Like,
yes,
my
yes,
apologies for cutting you off
yes,
because I was gonna say I do see that a lot where folks, even digital space, in person, doesn't matter. Our people just want more. They want to
yes,
figure out, where should I get started? And
yeah,
it's not because it's not always about like I want to learn spells and
yeah,
rituals. It's not
yeah,
always about
yeah.
that. I think a
No,
lot of folks just really want to learn more about the history of their ancestors. I think a lot of folks want to learn more about the spirituality
yeah,
of
yeah.
their ancestors, all the spiritual technologies that we have, because it's not just this one pinpoint thing that we've been
No, it's
fed
not. It
just
is not.
because we're Americans.
Right.
As far as our nationality is concerned,
Yeah,
our
yeah.
nationality should not
No,
pinpoint exactly
no,
who we believe
no.
in, what we praise, and what we
Exactly,
do in our traditions.
exactly,
So I
exactly.
do see a lot of folks wanting to know, what books do I read? Like,
Yeah.
you know, who can I talk to?
Mhm.
How do I figure out like genealogy? Which that's something I talk about a lot too, because I do see folks wanting to who have an interest in hoodoo. And I always say, start in your family.
Yeah, me too. I always tell them that.
Really?
There are
Okay.
lots of things that happen in your family that people don't call hoodoo because of that, right? I don't
Exactly.
practice no hoodoo, but then they do these things, right? And you're like,
Yes.
that looks like hoodoo, right?
Yes,
Yeah, so
exactly.
starting your family, all of these things. Why did grandmama do that? What did she do? What she remember when she did this and that? You don't go and say, remember that hoodoo grandmama did? No, she don't call it that. It's just what she did, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you write those things down. You keep a journal, and that's how
Mm-hmm.
you know you're open to it. It's your practice. You can do it. So yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. And I wanted with both books, but specifically this one, everything to be simple enough that you could do it and still go about your day, you know?
Absolutely.
One of my favorite rituals is scream water, right? And so that is just harnessing all of that energy of whatever is going on around you. You think about all of those things that you watch because we scroll a lot, right? You see
Mm-hmm.
on the news, you're seeing on the internet, all of it, that's making you angry, and you scream into that bowl of water. And you take that and you bring it out into, nature, the tree in your backyard, wherever, right? You pour that into the earth and you ask the ancestors, all of the energies that have traveled that land before you, right? To
Yeah.
take this and take it and to whip the ass of all those people, right, who are trying to subjugate us consistently every day, you know? And that is an effective ritual. And think about if 20 of us are doing that, how
Thank
much
you.
movement we
Yes.
can create,
Powerful.
and then honey, you can go about the rest of your day doing whatever you need to do. Put your lipstick on, get your hair together, and nobody has to know that you just scream their ass off. I mean,
That's so true. What is it like being an eighth generation witch? I think it's so beautiful carrying on the traditions, especially on the maternal side. Like my mother, my grandmother, great grandmother, my dear was the practitioner in our family. Same thing probably with some of your folks. Like, well, they didn't call it hoodoo, but there were
right.
things that they just did.
Yeah.
And you listen, you did what you were told. She
Mhm.
had her own like remedies, elves, mix it.
Yes,
You
yes.
you na- you name it, it was there because she was from Alabama.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's just so beautiful, like, tapping into that. And really, because where I am right now is where I am asking my grandmother
Mhm, mhm.
lots of questions to see what she remembers. And
Yeah,
I noticed what I did notice with my grandmother, because that was her mother. She was when I'm asking her questions, and I'm asking her about the salves and just the things, because what was so interesting to me was she always says, she's like, when I was a kid, we never went to the doctor. We never went to the hospital. We never had to, because she fixed this, gave us this, and we barely had colds. If
right,
somebody got a little boo boo on their leg, a little scrape, like she had something to rub on them. And I'm like, but what was in it? What was it? And she's like, I don't know, because we never asked her. We didn't question her. I don't know. And
right,
but the recipes, like you have the cooking recipes you got down pat.
right,
But everything else, she's like, I don't know. It was just, she was like, if I smelled it, I may,
right.
recognize
She
the
may remember
smell.
it. Yeah,
And
yeah.
she was like, but I don't know. And I'm like, oh, like I'm so hungry for it. Like,
Right, right,
so
right.
So I would love to know as far as your story and how is it that you came into the tradition and what is it like carrying this on as an eighth generation witch?
Yeah, yeah. Well, my grandfather, my on my mother's side, my mother's father, he would always say, "I'm a Geechee man," you know, and so that's
Mm,
what he would always say that, "I'm Geechee, I'm Geechee." And so from that side of the family, there was a lot of interest and a lot of he would always tell stories, right? And so his stories, he would always encourage you to write down things he said, "'Cause I might not remember this," you know? And so my brother and my sister, they were like my sister was like, "I'm on the phone, girl. I'm talking to whoever. I'm not listening to that. You got that." You know, my brother wanted to go outside and play football. He's like, okay, whatever. You entertain him." And so I listened to all of the stories. And sometimes, he would say stories more than once, but there would always be a different sort of a nuance in it that you got from it, right? That you could, take with you. And so I would have, all of these tablets of stories, and I use a lot of those stories in my writing, but it was just from him that and then on my father's side, his family is Honduran, right? And
mm,
so there was a lot of that interest and a lot of the Santeria culture, right? My grandfather, he traveled, he was a longshoreman. So he traveled to Havana a lot. And so he was initiated and he was a Batala priest. And so when I got initiated, my grandmother came forward and she's like, "Look, hold up, these men, but I'm gonna tell you
mm.
about us, right?" And so it
Got
was
it.
from there that I started to do a lot of channeling work and keeping journals of her information. And so what I found was that, part of it was working as a diviner, in the OYA realm, doing that work, but then writing down these books. Cause I kept thinking, I kept saying, I want to write, this great American novel. I want to do this. And, my grandpa was like, "That is not your way to go." And my grandma's like, "You sure not. It's sure not. You gonna write this hoodoo stuff. You about to do this." And so it took a lot of kicking and screaming, right? But for me, I find that listening and even to them when they were here in this realm and listening to them as they have passed over, sitting in communion with water and just jotting down what they have to say, it's kept me connected and kept me on the path of some things that my mother remembers, right, when she was
Mhm.
growing up, but then some things that she wouldn't remember, and I'll go to them with, and she's like, "Who told you that? They told you that?" And then, it'll jog her memory about it. She's like, "Yeah, sure was that." We did that thing. So it's being open and receptive and not being afraid. From a very young age, I could see spirits, right? And my mother used to tell me before I was able to see them, if somebody comes to you, you can't start, shrieking and screaming and running around like a fool, because they won't come back,
Mm,
you know.
mm,
And so
mm.
I always remembered that, and I thought, "Okay, whatever." And then when I did start seeing them at about 5 or 6 years old, I didn't do those things, and I was able to interact with that energy and to be able to and it reached a point where it was a constant. We moved into a home, and we found out later that it was a place where enslaved people would travel through, right?
Got it.
And there was a lot of movement in that home.
Yeah.
And so at night, they would try to tell their stories to me, right? And so I was going to Catholic school, and my mom was like, "Look, first of all, you cannot go tell those nuns none of this, right? Because they will lock you up," right? And so she made me a drink to help me sleep, right? And so that allowed me to go into a space where I could talk to them and let them know that I was young. I would be able to help them when I got older. But at this point in my life, I needed to, have my rest. I needed to live a child's life. And so I think that that was another part of it. My mom was supportive of the whole journey. She, never was like, "Don't talk about spirits, we're not doing that." And, a regular church-going woman, right? She understood that it all goes together, right? I mean, she is not initiated to Ifa, but, I mean, she will leave out candy for Eshu. She gonna talk to all of them, walk around the house, "How y'all doing, baby?" That kind of thing. And so I think for me that made it really communal, and
Mhm.
easy to keep, the energy and the information going. And so now my sister and my brother, when they call me for stuff, I'm like, y'all should have been listening." And they're like, We need this. We need this. There you go with all that, acting all sedity." I'm like, "No, I'm not,"
They're
but,
like, "Not you gatekeeping. How you gonna be
right, right.
gatekeeping?"
I'm like, "What?" And it's like, "No, I got this real serious problem," and it's like, "Okay."
But I love that they can just come to you
Yeah, yeah.
and talk about it, and, oh, I love that with their I love
And,
that.
you'll find that too. You just open the channel, because I
Mhm.
always tell people it's like they're waiting. They're waiting right there to pick up that phone. But if you're afraid, if you feel that spirituality has told you that you can't connect, you shouldn't when they're dead, they're gone, then you're not going to have that connection with them.
Right,
And any type of spirituality that only recognizes you when you can give an offering, right? But when you're gone, they're moving on to the next person. I mean, how many funerals do we go to in the church, right? And they're like, you're thinking, okay, you're gonna spend your time talking about my mama or my grandmama or whoever, right? And you're waiting for the next crop to come in. You're preaching your hardest so that you can get the next person to come join your church. And that's not what it should be about. It should be
right,
about the life of the person who devoted their time and their energy and their money to helping you. They're gone. So how are you going to revere that energy in that
yeah.
space? This is the space for that, not the space to try and, headhunt. So yeah.
Okay. You said so much that I can actually relate to. I could totally relate to seeing relatives after the funerals at
Mhm.
my grandmother's house. A lot of people passed in my grandmother's house in Mobile, Alabama. We still own this house to this day. Some people still live there, and just seeing them like it's nothing because I recognize this person. I can
Right.
tell this is they have on what we buried them in,
Yes. Yes.
and sharing that with my mother and my grandmother, and they're like, not first of all, they validated what I said
Yeah.
and affirmed me in a way that I didn't feel like I did anything bad or I said anything wrong.
Right. Right.
However, it was like, don't you go telling
Right.
nobody about your gift. Because then I
Yeah.
was taught it's a gift that
Yeah.
only we have. And I also remember my mother, and maybe this was something that she did because I was so young, where she was like, well, only you can see them because they're our people. So only
Yes.
we can see them,
Yeah.
and that's okay and that's special. But I understood like, no, it's important to not share that with everybody because
Right.
everybody's not going to understand.
No, they're
Super
not.
conscious of it as a child, so I can totally relate to you on that.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about Oya for a second because even like in speaking about my experiences as a kid and going to cemeteries to this day, going to the cemetery to visit a loved one, to me, like it's just a simple walk in the
Yeah.
park. I remember birthdays, I remember passing days.
Mhm.
If I'm going to a service and someone's being buried and I know there's other people at that cemetery, I'm gonna go visit the other people that I know before I leave. And it's just normal to me. And I understand even now as I'm in a space of bereavement currently and having these conversations, and I understand that not everybody just doesn't do like cemetery visits. And then there's some people
Yeah.
there's just like, I just can't. I
Yeah.
just I just don't want to. I don't think I can.
Mhm.
And so for that reason, I have always felt, or at least since my knowledge of Oya, I have always felt a connection with Oya because of that, because of my comfortability with those that have transitioned, but also in the space where they are, going to cemeteries, cleaning, practicing veneration at
Yes.
the cemetery, visiting, cleaning some of my loved ones'
Mhm.
headstones or getting it cleaned, getting it trimmed, and it's just very, I'm a bring my chair, my long chair
Yeah.
out and
Yeah. Yeah.
just chill. And even like taking my partner with me to one cemetery visit that I did with one of my aunts up in Yonkers, or
Mhm.
White Plains. And he was just like, wow, like I've never done this like as a
Yeah.
kid, never like thought about it. This is like kind of new to me because I'm just so fixed in this way of just, okay, there's the funeral, we do the burial, that's it.
Right, right. Yeah, we've always done that as well. We go there and clean. We go
Mhm.
there and bring back food and drink. I usually take a little, like maybe a baby food jar and take some of that
Mm,
soil back from that space and keep that in the home and even mix it with soil from around my home as protection.
wow.
Yeah, that is a
Yeah.
very, whenever I go, even if it's to see a relative or if it's a
Mhm.
friend of someone, I go and knock first, right? I always knock 3 times for a shoe, 'cause if it's good for me to come that day, because, it might not be a good day for me to be in that space, to even engage with them or their energies, right? So, and then after that, I'm usually there cleaning, and I'll try if there's someone near them who, looks like their grave hasn't been taken care of or upkept, I'll give some of the flowers and some of the food, put it there,
Mhm.
to their neighbors and things like that. Always bring extra. Always bring
Mm.
water to pour to cool the area. Just a way of thanking them, because we don't wanna always, one of the things about OYA is not to just be in the habit of asking, "Can you do this for me? Can you do this?" Or I need this," and you're not being reciprocal, because you wouldn't do that with your relatives if they were alive. "Grandmama, give me
Right.
this," "Grandpa, give me this, that, that." You always have to be nurturing, and even to those spaces, those sacred spaces.
Yeah.
And, for people who feel uncomfortable, I know my sister is one, she's like, "I'm not, I'm stopping right here, you know? I'll see y'all when y'all come back." I always, put some salt in your shoes, right?
Mhm.
And knock off that soil when you leave, things like that. And that has helped her, because she's really one. And I told her, I said, a lot of energy harbors around you because it knows, how you're fearful of it. And some of those energies,
Mm.
they're not malevolent. They just are tricksters, right? That energy. And so when she started doing the salt in the shoes, she started to feel better. And then she was able to go in to help. And so on certain days, she's like, I went and took care of the grave for our aunt, or whatever, things like that. But that Oya energy is truly about, solidifying that they're on this journey. And
Mhm.
so when someone passes, we usually sit out 9 glasses of water, right? And we have that candle in the middle. And so we say that it will take the venture 9 days for them to get to the land of the ancestors. And so each day we sit and we sing songs, or we recite things, anything that they like. If it was a favorite perfume, you would spritz that in the air, and you're letting them know that you're going to be okay, right? We want them to be there and to get with the ancestors and to learn their lessons, so that they can be able to help us. And Yoruba, we say, it takes about a year, right, and 2 weeks, right,
Mhm.
for them
Mhm.
to be able to help us out in that way. And so a lot of people feel like, okay, a year is the time, for them, and to be acclimated to their next level, right? Their
Mhm.
goon status. And so we honor that with those glasses of water. And then when that period is up, we pour that water out. We don't put their image up until that time is done. Because if they
Yeah.
see that image, they start to pull themselves back, and they think we're
Mm.
in need of them. And they need to be able to, get their skills up and do what they need to do so they can help us in the next realm. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on dreams? Because as you were speaking, I was thinking about someone who just lost their mother, and they talked about how their mother appeared to them in a dream and how it brought some type of peace,
Yeah. Yeah. I
but
believe that.
also just them just, them also just kind of being in shock, like, wow, like they just appeared so quickly because
Yeah.
it's just been like about a month or so.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, it happens. I'll give you I'll tell you a story. My best friend, from high school, she I was having my baby at the time when she transitioned, right? She
mm,
had been sick, and we had been talking about it, and she was like, "Girl, I feel like, I'm not gonna make it out of this hospital." And I'm like, "Girl, stop." Because she had been in the hospital several times before, and I'd gone to visit
okay.
her, and she was okay. And so she was like, "I just feel like this time," and I just kept saying, "No, you're not. You're gonna come out, and you're gonna see this baby when I have this baby." And she passed, in the hospital, and I was like, "Oh my God, I've just had a baby. I'm trying to go through all of these things with, my body, because I was having some issues with heavy bleeding and things like that." And
Mhm.
I was like, I was crying. I was like, "I can't go to the funeral. I can't." And I remember I called her mom, and she was like, "Look, we definitely understand. We know she knows." And it was like that for about a month, when I was able to finally get back up. And I was thinking about her, and I went to sleep, and she came to me. We were back in high school, right? We were out of high school, and we were back. I'm like, "Why am I back in high school?" And we were sitting in a science class, and I'm like, "I'm in the desk. I can't believe this." And she walks in, and she sits down next to me, and she starts to tell me that it's okay. You know?
Mm,
She understands, she knows I love her. It's okay. She's gotta do this thing. And that's what she
mm,
said, "I gotta do this thing, and we'll be okay." And I just kept thinking, you really feel, that I really wanted
Mm.
to be there. And she said,
Mm.
I know, and you were there in spirit. We left the school. I woke up the next morning. I was crying, but I really understood then that it was okay. I could let that go, how I
Yeah.
felt about that. So I
Yeah.
think that they come back to make sure that we're good, to let us know that they're gone, but it's okay for us to live, to continue to live, and not to
Mhm.
hold on to that hurt, you know what I'm saying, to
Mhm.
the point where we stop living, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
and I felt like that because I'm breastfeeding this baby. I love this baby, but I'm still feeling torn and like my best friend, I wasn't there,
Mhm. So there's like
feeling
a bit of guilt there
yes,
that you were
yes,
holding on to.
yes. And then when she came, like I said, we were back there in school and we're laughing and she's like, I just got to do this thing. So yeah,
Wow. Yeah, 'cause she even my friend, she mentioned, like, she cried.
yeah,
She just woke up and she
yeah,
said she started crying in
yeah,
the dream, and she woke up and she was really
huh? Yeah,
just crying, and she was like, "It just felt so real," and I'm like, "Because it was real. It was
right.
a real spiritual
It was real.
visitation."
Yeah. And
Yeah.
for spirit, that is the safest place to visit us because they
Mhm.
know that we won't run, we won't
Mhm.
try to
Mhm.
shake it off like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this." It won't get us all nerve-ridden, we won't be all
Mhm.
antsy and scared, it's safer in the dream, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I find so much comfort in that too, just having dreams and seeing certain people and them just saying, even if it's just a, "Hey, girl," or just
she
hearing
just
that
telling her to do
voice.
her thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that, for sharing that, because yeah, I think it's a part of the reason why I have this podcast. I just love being in this space, being able to talk about these things. I think
Right.
death and grief, it can be so hard to talk about.
Yeah.
However, with speaking with so many just people with so many different beliefs and
Mhm.
practices and traditions, and we all just have this connection of being Black, being African, being
Yeah.
Indigenous. I
Yes.
think that is what's really holding it together. What makes it so amazing that we all come from this source and we're
Right. Which
proud
is
and we're
so
finding
beautiful, right?
liberation.
With Asada's passing, to see so many people talking
Yeah.
about that, and it just took all away from the other stuff with the Kirk, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Brought
Mhm.
us into a
Right.
space where we can talk about this great warrior, right? We don't have
Mhm.
to be talking about why they doing that. We got a thing
Yeah.
to do, you know? So yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And may she rest. May she rest in power.
Power, yes. Yeah.
Yes, and it's such a happy story.
It really is.
Just of freedom, of liberation, and me, as I'm sure so many other people were like, "Oh, we go to Cuba, that's what we gonna look for
Yes, yes.
for
My
so
daughter is
long."
there studying medicine, right?
Really
Yeah.
amazing.
So she's like, we all decided last night that we're gonna have a scholarship in her name. We're gonna call it Revolutionary Medicine for shots. She's so excited.
That's
So
amazing. That's
yeah,
beautiful. That's cool. Yeah, I definitely want to take a trip.
yeah,
It's on my list,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I travel with intention, and my main
yeah,
intention when I
yeah.
travel is to figure out where's my next home because I'm
There
getting
you
out of
go.
here.
There you go. There you go.
I'm getting out of here. Like
Yeah, yeah. I think
we have
everybody, if
to.
we all are, we'll leave it to them. They can do whatever they
Okay.
want. Right.
Exactly, exactly.
Right.
We can conquer. There's so many lands because I've never
Yes.
felt like I'm or identified as a minority. I've
No.
always looked at the global
Right.
majority, like we're everywhere. We're
We are
everywhere. We're
everywhere.
on
We are
every
everywhere.
continent.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And everybody
absolutely.
knows our story here. They know exactly what we're going through, so they know how to say, come on over here, come get this hug, come get this love in this space."
Yeah.
Because, like Toni Morrison says, being an American, it's not being us, it's being white, right? Everybody else is, has a hyphen.
Mhm.
When we talk about
That
American, we're
part.
really talking about white people, right? So yeah,
Right. Absolutely. There's just no better feeling when I'm in Kenya or Ghana, Belize. I go to Belize quite often. It's a different feeling. It's a
yeah,
connection. It's just nothing like it, which is why I tell all my people, like, please get your passport and
hmm
please go somewhere within the diaspora.
right,
Because I get some people, because Ghana is a trek. Not gonna
Mhm,
hold you. It is such a trek to get over there, and that's why I try to stay as long as I can when
mhm.
I'm there because it's such a long trip. But yeah, just travel somewhere within a diaspora so you can just connect with folks over,
Yeah,
because it's not
yeah.
just us, it's not just it's not us. Yeah, this is so good. I'm like being fed spiritually in so many ways. I do want to get into your podcast too, because and also I'm a fan of your playlist on Spotify. Blood Moon,
Yeah.
you giggling, but I'm for real. I am a fan because it's just some days. See, that playlist, that's what I put on for my days when I'm cleaning on a Saturday or on a
All right,
Sunday.
girl. All right.
That's what I put on, even though I grew up with my grandmothers. They put on Aretha. They
Yeah.
may
Oh,
put
yeah.
on some
Yeah.
Anita Baker, Betty Wright, more so, yeah, like kind of R&B bluesy.
Mhm, mhm.
Etta James for sure.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Nina Simone. Like, yeah, my very heavy musical household that I grew up in where that's what I heard.
Mhm.
But yeah, Blood Moon, like that's what I'm putting on for my cleaning days, and it just really gets me into it. But I love it because I also can like transcend into other times and spaces
Right, right.
with the music, whether it's something where I'm listening to from the 40s and 50s, something more so in the 70s, 80s, into just 90s gospel, which is kind of more so my favorite era of gospel
Yeah, yeah,
for personal reasons. Just kind of growing up. I was born in '88, obviously, but I love how you curated that, and it's like I can listen to the book and then another day throw that on, and it's like no, I'm here because I feel like I'm learning. I'm still learning through listening to that music,
yeah, yeah.
and it's
And, I wanted the music to feel like if you were doing a ritual or doing any
hmm
type of work, you could use the music with it. You didn't
yeah,
have to feel like you needed a certain type of music, to
yeah,
go with. And even for people who feel like, okay, well, I still have to kind of hide what I'm doing,
hmm
use
hmm
that music and nobody still has to know what you're doing, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But through fish heads and the red gravy,
Frequency.
you are I think in your own way uplifting marginalized folks within like the esoteric,
Yeah. Yeah.
occult, even ATR's
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
But I want to know what inspired you to create that space?
Okay.
Yeah, because I know what inspired me to
Yeah.
create
It
this
was my
space.
grandfather. Fish heads and red gravy is a dish, courtillon is what it's
Mm-hmm.
called, and he loved courtillon. He would love to show you that head in there, everything, and the eyes and everything. But, for me, it was he would always talk about because he knew Marcus Garvey personally, right?
Mm.
And he would always talk about whenever he would tell a story, no matter what the story was, he would always end with when Marcus Garvey had to leave, right, in the port, and they're standing there, and all these people are singing, and they're crying, and there are thousands of people there, right? And he would always talk about being liberated, and whatever you do, he said, whatever you do, make sure that you're doing it for your people. And if you're doing something and all these white people love you, you're doing it wrong. That's what he would say.
Love that though. Real.
He would say that, "If that's the praise you got, you're in the wrong section, honey." That's what he would say. "Look at who's praising you." And so I wanted to do that because for a lot of people, when I talked on, podcasts or whatever, interviews,
Mm-hmm.
workshops, and there's one in particular that opens itself up to BIPOC people. And so after everything was over and we were all just kind of chatting it up, everybody was saying the same thing. They were like,
Mm.
when somebody invites us somewhere, we got to find out, are there any other black people are there? Are there any? And we were laughing about it, but it was so true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one guy, he was talking about being invited to Virginia in the mountains somewhere, right? And the guy told him it was a white event and they're going, you don't have any cell service or anything like that, but we want to be more inclusive. But he was going to be the only person of color that they were inviting. He was like, hell no. you know? And so as we went over and telling all our stories, everything that ever happened to us in these other spaces where we don't feel safe, and how people ask, well, why are you worried about that in a magical arena? I said, because racism is everywhere,
Yeah.
right? And I got to know when I walk in somewhere, am I going to be safe? I have to know that all this other stuff
Yeah.
aside, or is there anybody else there who looks like me? And so I created that to talk about those things, to a lot of times when we go to readers, if you go to, people go to tarot readers and
Mhm.
they're white, they kind of have a slant. A lot of people say they kind of slant how they read for them. They
Mhm.
assume, you want to know this because you're black, you want to know that, kind of thing. And they already have this kind of disgruntled, view of
Yeah.
what the person is going to ask them. So, talking about tarot in that way to open it up for us, it made me feel good doing it for other people who look like me. So the podcast, I wanted to center it on that, but then talk about all these other things that are happening, right? And how we can get through those things, and talk about books, and talk about anything that really centered itself on Black and Indigenous people of color. And so for me, that was the way, because we didn't have that. We
Yeah.
could kind of go in to other podcasts and talk about, the occult and esoteric things, but oftentimes they weren't really looking for us. It was kind of like, hey, I'm over here. Do you want somebody? And then instead of doing it that way, start my own thing, which is how we do everything, right? You're looking
Yeah.
for it, do it, you know? So yeah. And so, I've had people say, I really like it. Even when I did a workshop in Atlanta, people were bringing it up. And then there were some white people who were like, I think that it's very divisive to come to a magical workshop and talk about color. And I'm like, "Well, that's what I can talk about, because I'm a Black person." I mean, you don't need that because you're privileged, right? You don't
Right. Exactly.
up and think about that. I wake up in the morning, and when my 15-year-old is getting ready for school, I'm worried about his 6'4" ass, looking like a threat out there, right? Even though he's in the 10th grade. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
you don't have to worry about that with, Tommy or whoever, Billy, when they
Yeah.
go at the bus stop. So these are things. So I'm thinking about, how can I magically protect him? What do I put on this bay leaf today so he can
Yeah.
stick it in his shoe and be protected when he's out there away from us? So those kind of things, we constantly, deal with. And so the podcast for me, I knew that there were lots of other people out there who were dealing with the same things, the same issues,
Mhm.
and they needed to have a space where they could, feel like they were heard and seen. So yeah,
Absolutely.
to do that with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so needed because we're still dealing with this BS,
Yeah.
even within so many spaces where we're talking about the psychedelic community,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
the
Girl, look,
magic
there were
community.
people walked out when I did that workshop in Atlanta. There was one woman, because I was trying to show them how you can work with saints, how you can create,
Mhm.
do your own saint work, right? And so a lot of people were really receptive. Of course, the Black people were like, yeah, girl, go. But the white people were like, I can't identify with this person, and in tears. And I guess she thought that I was going to go over there and rub her back. I'm like, okay, well, then you can just put yours down, and then we're moving on. You
Okay,
know,
and move on.
I'm not here for that. I'm not your mammy. I'm not going to do any of those
Mhm.
things for you. You know, if you want to learn what it is that, turns us off from these spaces, then listen to what I'm saying. But if you want to continue down the road of doing what you're doing, right, excluding, then continue to, act as though you're being the victim. You know what I'm saying? You know, and so when
Yeah.
I talked about, because I talked about Fannie Lou Hamer and, the
Mhm.
Mississippi appendectomy, all of these women who, can't have babies, right? All of
Yeah.
their parts are being taken out when they go in for simple procedures. And, you're squirming in your seat, and I'm saying that's wrong, right? And you won't even admit to that. So you're not ready to do this work. You're a
Yeah.
pretender. You just want to put BLM on your sites and all of that, but you're not really ready to do the work, to be an accomplice in changing things.
Is there a way to protect our tradition in this space, especially now that we're in this digital age and
Hmm.
we're also in this space of AI being
Right.
everywhere. And I think now it's a little more. It's beyond just us having to figure out which hoodoo books are actually written
Yeah.
by
Oh yeah.
us
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and which Pinterest or Tumblr or Instagram accounts that's talking about hoodoo are actually, you know,
Yeah.
created by
Yeah.
someone
I
that's
think
that's of
creating
us.
workshop spaces, you know? Creating those workshop spaces where you can really start to engage with those individuals who write those books, right? Because
Mhm.
when you start to call those people out, when you start to have the workshops, then there's no way to hide behind this black image of a person that I
Yeah.
claim wrote the book and it's not, you know? So having those spaces for ourselves where we're really working with each other, whether that's, in person or, digital, however, over the internet, but having those spaces where we're able to come in communion with each other, it takes away and you avoid all of that hiding, behind a fake image of a person. So I think the more we become communal with each other, and I think
Mhm.
this political climate is making us, have to do that. Whether you felt like you needed to rely upon your sisters and brothers and
Ugh.
everything, you're being
Yeah.
forced because you're forced out of, right? You're being forced out of that circle. And so, yeah, I think we the more we're in each other's face, then we can
Mhm.
start to see, what's going on and we can build in that way. And that's something that AI can't take from us
Absolutely.
ability
Yeah.
to be there with each other and to be working with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's what's happening with so many people wanting to learn, so many
Yeah.
people
Oh, yeah,
wanting
I know. I definitely know.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I something I say all the time, and this is what I was taught because I am someone that's carrying on the traditions through my family, through my lineage, and also being in the space of other folks who practice ATRs because I'm not initiated yet.
Mhm, mhm.
But I always tell folks like you can't practice by yourself. You have to
No.
have community.
Yes, you
You
have to.
have to have
You have to.
community, and I'm not sure if people even understand what that means. If you wanted to
Right.
kind of elaborate a little bit on that, because
Yeah.
it's to me, community is everything, and I think a lot of folks, even with centers, for example, because people just see the character Annie, and they
Mhm.
just see one person like, oh, she's the hoodoo lady or she's the
Right.
practitioner lady, and so many of us grew up where that was our mama or grandma or whoever. So we don't see like the community that she is actually in and where she comes from. And I love how in the film she says, this is magic work, root work that my grandmama taught me, like
Right.
what she
Right.
taught me. You know what I mean? Like, and
Right.
the
Right.
importance of that. So can you,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
just
I
share.
think that is something that, people always talk about, especially in the ATR community, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have community, so building that community, it could be you and your close friends, it could be you and your, siblings, your mate or whoever, your children. So it's just somebody else besides you to help harness that energy and to help the practice grow, right? And so it doesn't always have to be that you're right there in the vicinity with each other. It could be over the internet, but you're still building, you still have that community. So you can still Zoom each other and do work
Exactly.
together, but you don't want it to just be you in this vacuum by yourself working it out. You know, in order for the energy to grow, in order for it to be its most, efficacious, you have to have people working with you, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
it could be one other person, but more than you, that helps it to build and that helps it grow. And then all of that knowledge, you're never really alone because all of that information
Mm-hmm.
that you've learned, it's came from somewhere else. And then that person who learned it from somebody else, and it's there with you, but you just have to recognize it. And anytime that you're able to participate with other people in their space, then do that. You know, it really will build your tolerance for magic, but it will also help you to see things happen, manifest quicker, when you're working in communion.
Yeah. Would you like to share any advice or insight to someone that is looking to start, or I guess in the early stages, or they're just thinking about maybe just seeking some type of wisdom on how to start their journey? Like how I mentioned, I always say look within your family, your own lineage, find a community, because I think it's more than just like telling people what books to read. Because I
Yeah,
think
it's
with some,
definitely more than that.
you
Yeah,
get what I'm saying. Like it's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's more than
yeah.
that. Even though that does tend to be folks' number one question. Like, like
What
I
we
want to
feel.
read.
Yeah.
I want the
Yeah.
knowledge first to process that. But how do I, how did I get started? Because I can never really answer that,
Yeah,
to
I
be
think that
honest.
that's one, I agree with you with looking within and your family, looking for community, but looking for a safe community, a place you feel safe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I find that that's a biggie, especially when you have people coming out of the church, right? You have a lot
Yeah.
of people who go into other spiritual systems, but they still want to run it like a church, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't want somebody having this, ownership over your life, And so you really want to be careful with looking when going. The first community you find isn't the one, might not be the one for you. Don't just run and jump and say I'm with them because they're here. They must be the ones I'm supposed to be with. No, still vet them too.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say, sitting with a glass of water and the image of a trusted ancestor, somebody you really loved and felt really loved you and looked out for you, light a candle, have a journal, sit there and talk to them. You might not get anything for maybe a few days, but eventually they'll start to talk to you and let you know where you need to go. It may be in a dream, and then you get up and you write it down in your journal, right? Some people, it's when they sit there with that journal. Sometimes I tell people they can use a mirror, right? You can use a black mirror, sit it there with that image, that candle, and your journal and just wait. Just sit and wait, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you feel like if you can take the smell of incense, light some incense, your favorite incense, right? And sit and wait. And you'll start to get messages. You can't rush time because there's no time for them, right? They don't wake up at 8 o'clock and say, okay, let's do this. It's not real. It doesn't happen that way. So you may sit there for a week, a
Yeah.
month, and then all of a sudden something comes. And so start doing that, making that a regular practice. And then when they see the seriousness in you, then they'll come and they'll answer whatever you have and tell you exactly what direction you need to go in, right? Because it may not be that you need to go to hoodoo first. You may need to go
Yeah.
somewhere else first. And that may, circle you back around to hoodoo eventually. But
Mm-hmm.
sit and listen. And, those ancestors, even that image that you have there, they may say, well, I don't really know, but they may call somebody else for it. But it's just the idea that you've talked to them first, and now they can talk to some other ancestors and tell
Yeah,
them,
that
hey,
you're
you
here.
got the answer for this? Yeah, yeah. This is not my area, but do you? So yeah, and so that's what I tell people to do. And a lot of people, when they stick with it,
Mm-hmm.
have success with that. You know, it's about, we have to, for a lot of us, get out of I want it right now, because that's what we want, right? And that's why a lot of them want the books. They want
Yeah.
to go straight to the spell because, girl, I just want to know. Let me turn to page 88 and see what it says about this, you know, and they
Yeah,
don't
like a
really
quick
want to read it.
fix. Yeah, thinking of
Go get it right then. Girl, this book don't work, that
mm-hmm.
kind of thing. But you're not
Mm-hmm.
really digesting the information. You're not sitting with the information. You just, did it take you, was it a quick thing that you got into that trouble? You know what I'm saying? Was it really quick that you got with that person and now they're a terror in your life? Did that
Mm-hmm.
happen quickly? So you have to take your time with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
would you say the same kind of it also applies even with ATRs or even with folks? Because I also I think I've witnessed a few people even within the I'm a part of a book club. So even with this book club that I'm in, one of the elders was speaking about how a lot of young folks are so eager to join an ATR or so eager to connect with one Orisha
Yeah.
without going through the
Yeah.
proper
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yes. Yes.
and
I
I
would
do
agree
see
with that.
that, yeah, I
Yeah.
was like, because I do see elders kind of talking about that, like there's just this eager to just connect with this one
Yes.
Orisha, and
Yes.
also just kind of this blend of Ifa and Hoodoo, and not necessarily having that knowledge or not even
Yeah.
knowing what they're doing, what they're
Yeah. Yeah.
doing. Um,
Yeah.
because I think what I've been taught was that, yeah, it finds you and it tells you, you don't
Yeah.
tell it. Or you
Yeah,
don't
I
tell
see a
them?
lot of people who say, I know I'm a shun because look, because I like pretty things, and then they go up in there and then they're Obatala, you know what I'm saying? And then they're like, I don't know if this is for me, kind of
Mhm.
attitude, right? These guys, I'm Shango, I know it because I can pull all these ladies,
My goodness. Why does every man wanna be a Shango
Yeah,
and every woman
girl,
wants to be a
stop.
Oshun?
Yes, yes, yes. Everyone, right? And I'm like, that it doesn't work that way. That's not the way it is. But you know what? I found this was years ago.
Hmm.
A sister was telling me that she went, I can't remember where she went. I want to say, I don't know if it was somewhere in Florida, but this guy, you could pay him and he would just get you the pot of whoever you wanted to be. And I said, well, you see, that's why if there's one of him doing that, there's probably others doing that, you know? Exactly. And so you have these people and they come to, and so they expect everybody to just, that's what I want. And it doesn't work that way. So yeah, I do see that. And it's the same thing. It's that hurry up and give me what I want, and I don't want to travel the road to find out why Obatala is sitting at my head.
Mhm.
What I need is from Obatala, not from Oshun. You right?
Mhm.
And so they don't want to hear that, that message. They just want the quickness of it. And I think it's about once again, being in communion, right? Being with people who can teach you and you listen, right? And understand all of the Orisha. Start to
Yeah.
read. I tell people, study all of them. I give them books
Mhm.
to look at, right? Study all of them, right? Don't sit there talking about, I'm this one. I think I got this. This is not, no, it doesn't work that way. Just study them. And there's something there from each of them because throughout our lives, we pass through different phases within all of them, right?
Mhm.
So at this point in your life, you might be in your Oshun state, right?
Mhm.
But that doesn't
Mhm.
mean you're gonna stay there forever, you know? And so at one point you may need that Yemonja energy. So yeah, I just think that when you're in communion with other people, then you
Yes.
can learn more. And I think that, like you said earlier, that's problematic with being by yourself, right? That's
Yeah.
part of it, right? When you're by yourself, then you start to make up the rules, you know? And so
That
you start
part.
to do things like, I know I am, and and he's my
Yeah, and
husband.
become vulnerable too, I think. Become really
Yes,
vulnerable to
yes,
people
yes.
like
And girl, it can get
scamming.
really crazy. I saw this was probably years ago it was on Facebook, but it was to this site and dedicated to Orisha worship. And so one lady was talking about how when she has sex and like she's an OYA. And I'm thinking, hmm, what? Delete. This is crazy. I'm like, really? So are you saying you have sex like a tornado? I don't know what you're saying. I don't know. And they're like, oh, yeah, and I guess she thought that that was a, way to pull him in. I don't know. But, that is another example. And she wasn't initiated, but that was
Mhm.
another example of not being in communion, having
Mhm.
eldership, right? Because a
Mhm.
lot of times we don't want to listen to older people. We think they're just going to try to run our lives. But, actually listening to somebody tell you, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
The right way to go.
Because there's and we're actually gonna wrap up soon. But this is just so good because I think it just needs to be said. So I appreciate everything that you're saying because yeah, there is an initiation that has to happen and there's prep work before the initiation, correct?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you obviously have to have the knowledge and
Yeah.
understanding
Yeah.
and understand the responsibility of what you're doing. I think that was just super necessary because I do see a lot of folks being so vulnerable and so eager to join an ATR and automatically attaching themselves to one Orisha and not looking at or trying to understand the dozens of Orishas that we
Right.
that we
Right.
actually have
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and all their gifts and powers and how we all can
Yes.
be connected to them in a way like beyond what we even think of
Yeah.
beyond
Yeah.
measure.
Beyond the surface, what you've taught. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I was gonna ask if you can share kind of like that process of initiation or just even like the tools, whether it's the divination tools and what's necessary to even be in the space of beginning to join an ATR because it's a huge
Right.
responsibility. I think that's the part people don't know. It is
Right.
a
It
huge
really is. It
responsibility.
really is. And different houses or elays do
Mhm.
things differently. But I think one of the first things is really the study, the knowledge. And so I know for me and my family, when we first started, it was about, just knowledge, metaphysical knowledge, right?
Mhm.
A lot of knowledge about your
Yeah.
body, your health was one of the first things. And it was, actually listening, it was almost like you being in a lecture class, right? You had to have a journal, you had to write it down. There was no typing, nobody was going to give you the papers because that was about being committed to it. That was a part of it, right? Being able to sit there and to actually write out what is being taught to you, learning about the lower natures of the human existence, right? Thinking about everything is not about sexual, of a sexual nature, and how we can heighten our understanding, right?
Yes.
Our magic, what we use, what we do. It doesn't just live here, right? It rises up. So it's about the knowledge part. Definitely studying the Orisha, all of them, looking at, the attributes that they have, studying different stories about their lives, understanding how what they've done, how it would be effective and pertinent to your life today. And so really, once you really start to understand that, then you fall out of that realm of thinking you know who you are, right? Because now it's about what your life is like now and what you need now at this point in your life, right? And then you start to understand how each Orisha can help to make change in your life. And then you go into that point of understanding, am I ready for initiation? Right? Because now you have to really be confronted with those issues of, okay, I thought I was this. I'm finding out that I might be in my mind, I'm thinking I might be something else. Before these people start to throw on this, right? Am I ready? Right. And so they walk you through all of that. Some places you're wearing white for a year. Some places, head to toe, right? Everything, underwear, everything, right?
Yeah.
So if you were used to the thong, now you got to wear the mammy, undies, that's what
Yeah.
you're wearing. I'm sorry, make it sexy. I don't know, you know, and some places you might not have that intimate time, right? For that spell, for a few months or whatever, covering the mirrors. In our home, we have to cover the mirrors,
Mhm.
right? And so it takes away from that idea of being vain, right? So now you're looking at yourself from inside, right? You're examining who you are as you step away from that. So you got to get prepared, all of that. You're not seeing that. And so there again, it takes away from that thinking you know who you are. So now you can't be as vain as you would like to make Ocean out to be, right? So now you have to really, study yourself. And so you're going to bed at a certain time, right? You are eating out of your own plate and cup, whatever. You're not going to as many social engagements because you're really being in tune and really being ready for initiation. So it is a process, and it doesn't just happen overnight. And
Mhm.
so you have to be really ready to have this energy at your head. And then after you go through that, are you ready to take care of this energy? It's not just you have this in your home and now it looks really pretty and you want to show everybody when they come over. No, you have to take care of this energy. What are you going to do to take care of it? How does because that in turn will dictate how that energy takes care of you. Being an Oya, I live in this place, this area, and so there's always a lot of bad weather. And so we think about when tornadoes come. I always send out a Rikis for Oya, right? I always have things that I offer to Oya. Prior to initiation, man, we would have trees coming down all the time. We'd be like, cringing in the house, like, I've been at the house after that, we didn't worry about that. I was like, and my initiator, she's like, "Yeah, oh yeah." I was like, "When were you gonna get it together?" She was coming closer, and she was inching closer and closer, you know? And so it's about taking care of that energy. Are you
Mhm.
ready to do that for the rest of your life? Because you can't
Mhm.
turn it on and turn it off, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a major step for people to take. And I think, they think, and not to be facetious about, getting baptized or anything like that, but I
Mhm.
think for a lot of people, they think, it's like when you get baptized, okay, you can decide I'm not going, I'm gonna show up on Easter and Christmas or whatever, or, I'm gonna go do something else. It's not like that. You can't turn it off and on. You have to take care of that energy, you know, you have to.
Thank you for sharing that because it is, from my understanding, it's a huge responsibility.
It is.
It's a new life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complete change or shift in your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me personally, I'm still in the space of learning and listening and being in the space of elders, folks who have been practicing, folks who are part of elays and and just being there of service and
Mm-hmm.
And I was just told, like, when it's your time, you'll know
You
when
would
it's your
definitely
time.
know. You would definitely know. Yeah, because then when it is your time and you feel it in your spirit,
Mhm.
right, you're going to and none of that will matter. Whatever the rules
Mhm.
are for you in that
Yeah.
house, you're gonna be able to follow through, you know?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that's how it was for me. I didn't even I care. It wasn't a second thought about covering the mirrors or doing this or doing that, not being able to go these places. I felt good about it because I knew that it was for a higher calling. It was something
Right.
that I needed to do. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing all of the things, all
Thank you for having me. Thank you
the
so much.
gems. I've been so excited to talk to you for a while. Offline, obviously.
Thank you so much too. Look, I was stalking your page too. I was like looking at this, looking at that. I was like, oh, look at she's got a pretty dress on. Look at this, look at that.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and it's kind of the few times where social media is like, okay, this is a
Yes,
positive.
yes, yes, yes.
Finding your people, finding your community,
Yeah,
and being able to connect with folks. So
yeah. And your energy is so warm. I mean, you are
thank you.
such a beautiful spirit, really. And it's like, oh my goodness, I have got to talk to her. I'm gonna beg her to be on her show.
No,
She's gonna say you're a stalker. I'm like, I'm
you're
just
on my list. You are on my list. Oh my goodness. Like it was already aligned. You were on my list. I mean, already familiar with your work through the books and I don't know if are you familiar with Buku Hoodoo, the book
yes.
club?
Well, you
Okay.
know what? And every time we talk, because she in New Orleans, and every time we
Mhm.
talk, it's like we always miss each other, right? And so she was like,
Okay.
"Girl, look, I'm doing this." I'm like, "Girl, stop," because we just missed each other. I don't want to hear that.
Oh my goodness, we have to have you, like, because Chantrell P. Lewis, who we're talking about, does the
Hmm.
festival, created the book club through the pandemic, does the festival annual meetup. It's almost kind of weird even calling it a festival because it's so much more. It's like a way
It's
for all of us
beautiful.
to
It is
meet.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's so amazing. So I love that just being a member of the book club and also being a part of the festival because sometimes I do a workshop around menstruation, menstrual work.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah, I
I'm
saw
I'm
that, and I
okay
was
with
telling
being
my
of
daughter
service.
about that, about she
Really?
yeah, she's in Atlanta. She just graduated from SCAD, and then she was like, she
Okay.
did design, and then she was like, she wanted to act, and then she's like, oh, you know, and she's like all heady, but she's always complaining about, her menstrual cycle. And I was
Mm.
telling her about yeah, and she's like, oh, some days, and because she was sharing a room, it was so funny with these with the other student with white students, right?
Mhm.
And so she was like, and I just be in the bed, and they'd be on the floor playing their board games, and like, get out.
Poor thing, Lord.
Mhm.
And so many young sisters like still deal with these
Yeah,
issues like
yeah,
like no other. And it's heartbreaking because even with talking to some elders, there's some elders I talk to and they're like, we just didn't have, these kind of problems, or we did our castor oil packs.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
We did our herbal teas, we had our black cohosh and St. John's wort. We just had our things that we
Yes, yes.
did, but they also say like that was definitely a time where we also not all of us had access to birth control.
Exactly, exactly.
And I totally get it. Like birth control has done wonders for a lot of people. Totally get it. However, there's a bunch still where
Mhm.
birth control has kind of shifted their hormones in a way that they can't get back to that balance, or
Yeah,
it's just so hard for them to get back there.
yeah.
And it's just, super unfortunate that for people, I'm sure around like your daughter's age, when
Mhm.
they go to the doctor and it's like, oh, I have a bad period, and they're like, oh, okay, just get on birth control and it'll be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah.
And it's like sometimes that's a quick fix, but okay, if she gets off of it, now what? Is
Yeah.
everything gonna
Well, she started
return?
on her teas and things like that because
Mhm.
definitely that's what the
Yeah.
doctor said. She's like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And so, and just the yoni steams and stuff, those things
Mhm.
helped her out. So
Oh,
yeah, she's
yes.
very consistent about those things. So yeah, I was telling her just to go ahead, and she was like, at first she was like, kind of like, I would just go to the doctor. I'm like, I'm telling you what to do. So then she
Listen,
started. So now it's like I'm doing it all the time. Yeah.
oh my goodness, yoni steams, which I talk about a lot because there's
Hmm.
so many doctors that don't understand it, and it's just like they're not gonna understand like an ancestral
No,
practice like that.
no,
Tradition
no.
of women just
No,
women, they're just not
no,
gonna
and they
get
can't
it,
make
like
money off of it.
correct.
They don't wanna understand. Yeah. Now if you
Exactly.
could write a prescription for a yoni steam, then they'd be good with that. Yeah.
Right. Exactly, which is why the few Black OBGYNs that I know, I tell them, like, just try it, and it's nothing wrong with just trying it. It's almost as if I actually had an experience really quick where I had to talk to an OBGYN on this app. I don't know if you remember Clubhouse or if you ever got
Yes,
on
I remember
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what a time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I was chatting with this OB on Clubhouse, and when we were, I thought, having a civil conversation about yoni steams and pains, and more so holistic practices, like
Yeah.
the reason why a lot of us, we're waiting to have that fibroid surgery. We're
Mhm,
waiting to get our a proper endometriosis diagnosis,
mhm.
but in
Yeah,
that waiting, we're still in pain, and we're gonna look to a Queen Afua. We're going to look to the ancestral work of Avina Fulton and look at what we're eating, our lifestyle, our hormones, all the holistic things.
yeah,
Eastern medicine. We're gonna
yeah.
go there for the most part. African medicine,
Mhm.
essentially. And I was just like, well, why don't you just try yoni steam? And she's like, oh my God, no, I'm not doing that. I was like, girl, I didn't say that you were gonna go dance with the devil. Like, but
Right, right, right.
that's the reaction she
Right,
gave me, like,
right,
oh my God, no, like, God forbid, like, absolutely not. And I
right,
was like, wait, do you think, I was like, you don't have to answer this, and I don't think you're going to, but because there were other doctors in the room, I was like, but do you think, like, yoni, are you equating yoni steaming to like some type of like a spiritual, like, esoteric, or is it like something against maybe your personal
right,
religion? And I was like, but is that belief rooted in white supremacy? Are you always equating anything dealing with like ancestral traditions, indigenous traditions, with like devil worship or something? I was like, white supremacy. So that's literally what that is. And it was crickets. I think I actually got booted out the room. but but it was just very, I was like, huh, like this is very, it's very telling, because I never got that response before, because I thought I was just like, but because why are you being so negative towards something that you actually know nothing about, and you never tried it? And I was like, back in the day, castor oil packs. I was like, do you know what that is? And she was like, not really. And I was like, okay, well, I had to kind of break it down. It was like a whole
right, right, right.
it was a whole thing. So yeah, no, I bless your daughter. Yeah, because I'm sure listening to you, she will be in way better shape than just kind of like being in pain and just
Right.
figuring out, like, oh, let me just do a pill or whatever. Because at around college, Midol,
Yeah,
I'm actually allergic to ibuprofen, but that's when I figured out that I was allergic to it, because a lot of those things made me sick, or it just didn't help any pain, so I kind of had to really look into, what did my ancestors do when
right.
they had these issues, and yeah, it works for me. No
Yeah,
birth
definitely,
control, no
definitely.
over the counter meds. It's like, that's what it is. I pray over my herbs before I seep them.
Yeah,
Like, that's what it is for me. So no, I hope she finds what works for her. And
yeah. She says that that's working for her teas and her steam.
okay, great. No, that's super great. Thank you so much for,
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
yeah, for being on here and chatting with me. And listen, everybody out there, Hoodoo Saints and Root Warriors, go get it. It's a special treat. Like, it's right on time. Y'all have been requesting and asking for more books since Centers came out, and here you go. Here
And
you
work with your
go.
community. Get your book
Right.
together and do those works.
Right. Absolutely. Get it together, find your community, connect with book clubs. There's Buku Hoodoo Book Club. There's oh my goodness, and you're on social too. So I'm like,
Yeah.
holla at this queen on
Yeah,
social. She
definitely,
has
definitely.
no problem educating folks. If you have a moment to listen, it's like she gonna give it to you right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, you've been listening to the practice of a Hoodoo Baptist. Until next time, peace.